Welcome to the newest devlog for my indie game Vitality. This video is about the remake of the Plains dungeon that I just made. If you're a new viewer, here's what the old dungeon looked like compared to this new one. I've been working on this dungeon for around 8 months now, but a lot of this time has been spent figuring out systems and fixing things, so most of my progress has been made in the last 3 months. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about all the weirdness I had to deal with while making the dungeon. The first thing I do when making things for Vitality, especially dungeons, is to draw out a version of the map with the puzzles and enemies so that I can better understand how to make it. I actually drew the map for this version of the dungeon at school, and so originally, the map existed only in my homework binder, until I finished it and took it out of there. Here's the map for floor 1 and 2, with the enemies and puzzle elements where I would end up placing them. I planned out the dungeon to have 5 floors, which are floor 1, floor 2, basement floor 1, basement floor 2, and basement floor 3. Basement floor 3 is just what I call the arena where you fight the final boss, the Grand Bumbleaf. Next, I'm going to talk about the modeling of the dungeon, and how I had to switch from voxels to a Blender model. Modeling the dungeon was a long process with multiple iterations. Initially, I modeled the dungeon in my voxel modeling program of choice, Magicavoxel, which you can see on screen right now. When I imported it into Unity, however, I found that it was causing quite a bit of lag, and only having around 5 FPS, which is a lot lower than I'd like to have. The reason this happens is because of the way Magicavoxel handles models. You can see here that there are around 1 to 2 polygons per individual voxel on the Magicavoxel model, whereas if you look at the new model, I only use 1 polygon for each side. The way I made the new model was using Blender, by recreating each side of each room with planes, and using textures to make it match the colors of the dungeon. This is great for performance, and I was able to get around 60 FPS in engine, which is a lot better. Next, I added puzzles and enemies into the dungeon. I talked about the new enemies last devlog, so if you want to hear more about them, you should check out that video. After this one, of course. Because of that video, I'm going to mostly talk about the puzzles in this one, so that I don't repeat myself. The first puzzle element in the dungeon is this red and green statue, which always come in a pair. The unique thing about these statues is that one of the statues gets moved, the other one does too. For example, the third room of the dungeon has a green statue on the first floor, and a red statue on the second. You can see that when I go to the upper floor and move this green statue to the other side of the room, the red statue will then also be moved to the other side of the room. Later on, you have this mirror with the green statue on one side and the red statue reflected in the same spot. The way to solve this puzzle is to find the button, which can only be seen in the mirror, and move the green statue onto it. Additionally, there are green cubes that block statues from entering, to prevent players from taking statues where they shouldn't. They're also used as puzzle elements to make transporting the statues a little bit more of a mental challenge. Another puzzle element are these bouncy flowers right here, which bounce players into the air. There are also fake bouncy flowers which collapse when you step onto them, but you are able to tell which ones are real or fake, and there's a puzzle room that's entirely based on that. The Plains dungeon is in the middle of the Plains Deadlands region, which is a large section of the map with dead grass and trees. Normally, there's a crystal chunk, which is a large piece of magical crystal, but the Dark Lord has corrupted the crystal chunk, taking its power for himself. This is draining the life force from the area around the crystal and creating the Deadlands. The Bumbleaves are nature element minions of the Dark Lord, set up to guard the crystal chunk and prevent people from uncorrupting it. When you go through the dungeon, you fight the Bumbleaf Mage, who is the general of the Bumbleaves, and the Grand Bumbleaf, who is the boss of all of the Bumbleaves. Once beating the Grand Bumbleaf, there's a difference between the actual game and the version out now. The version out now has a screen letting people go back to the title screen and talking about the devlogs here on this channel. In the full game, however, there will be a cutscene with the crystal chunk and a memory from the player's past. That's all I'll mention about the story for right now, because I don't really want to spoil too much about it. If you look closely, or not too closely, you can see that there's a difference in lighting between the previous update and this one. I've changed up how the lighting works, and I've also changed certain details about post-processing, but I might still change the lighting in the future, as it's not exactly how I want it to be just yet. The next update for Vitality will include the Plains, which is the first piece of open-world content this game has ever had. In the past, there have only been dungeons in the game, but now we'll finally have an area around the dungeon, with quests, NPCs, and world design. Because the Plains update will be larger than previous updates, it means that I'll probably split it up into multiple different updates talking about different aspects about it, like towns in the world, NPCs, or the main quest. That's all for this video, but before you click off the video, make sure you subscribe so that you can see when the next video comes out. I'm really looking forward to making the Plains area, as it's a new area as opposed to remaking an older one. I've already started working on that, so it should be a shorter wait between devlogs.